The Volkswagen GTI story is a well-told one by now, so let's not get bogged down in an aggrandizing exposition, as tempting as that may be. But it would be remiss not to hark back to the very first GTI badged Volkswagen at the start of this particular Up review. Because Volkswagen itself is at pains to point out the similarities between this, the 2018 Up GTI, and this, the 1976 Golf GTI. True story, got the first press release here. The very first bullet point says, the concept of the 115 PS Up GTI follows the genetic heritage of the first Golf GTI 110 PS, which is corporate speak for it's small and light and slightly quick. But it's also another way of saying that today's actual Golf GTI doesn't follow the genetic heritage, because it's a big fat bastard. So here's the original Golf GTI, and here's the 2018 Golf GTI, and here's the Up GTI. And here are the relevant statistics. And what do you know? Sure enough, the 76 Golf GTI is much closer to this Up than to its 2018 namesake. In some cases, it's very close indeed. Like the power, the performance, and the size are near identical. The Up's a bit heavier, but that's largely because it's safe, which most cars weren't in the 70s, you'll probably remember. Like, why have airbags when your big mustache will basically do the same job?
Out of necessity, we will become the mothers of invention.
And I mean, you can't really blame Volkswagen for making the Golf bigger and podgier. All the best stuff gets bigger and podgier as it gets older. So I tell myself anyway. Upshot is that, whether by accident or by design, the Up GTI here has more than a hint of a classic about it. On top of that, the base car will, in my humble opinion, become a modern classic. I like it so much that I bought one as our family runabout. And so just to recap on what's so brilliant about the Up, pretty much 7 years after its launch, it remains the benchmark for city car refinement, for use of space, and for functionality. It's also ergonomically superior to an awful lot of big cars, while the wheels pushed right to the corners sort of thing makes it perfectly maneuverable around town. And it's genuinely enjoyable to drive because it has more than a hint of good, honest, old school simplicity. That all applies to the Seat and the Skoda badged ones as well, obviously. So you can imagine that I, a former Up owner that recommends one to anyone that asks me about which small car they should buy, and by Up I mean Citigo, it's cheaper isn't it, was pretty flippin' excited about the prospect of a proper fast one. Especially one that's going to go back to the basic laws of the 70s Golf GTI. Except also with much less risk of being decapitated in a low-speed prank. But what do you know? This thing is absolutely slightly disappointing. Let's start with the good stuff though. It's still brilliant in all the same ways that the normal Up is. The engine still has the same growly, exaggerated 3-cylinder character, except now it's got more poke. And because this thing is tiny, that means it can occasionally feel amusingly rapid, especially in second and third gears. The engine has 115 PS, that's metric horsepower, and 200 Newton meters of torque, although the Up down from this has 90 and 160 respectively. So you're not getting a massive performance leap with the GTI by any means. It only takes about a second away from the 90 horsepower one's 0 to 62 time. Although the benefit is that here is a GTI badged non-diesel that will give you close to 60 miles per gallon. Officially anyway. Doesn't really feel like much has been done to the chassis either. The suspension's a bit firmer and you can feel more of the road because of the relative porosity of the tyre walls. It still rolls quite a lot. That's good for ride quality, but not so much for the go-karty type vibe that you might expect from a car that's this quick and this small. Similarly, the steering, which remains really light. Too light for a car like this, I think, but again, good for the everyday door-to-door type stuff. Not much cosmetic change either.
She has great shoulders, but she doesn't have much of a figure.
It's true that this is the best looking Up on the showroom floor, what with its big body kit and its GTI badging, and inside its seats that are upholstered in that classic tartan trim from the Golf GTI. That said, I would like these to have been proper sports seats rather than just reupholstered flat ones. And I just generally like a bit more sportiness in here, you know? Not a roll cage or anything like that, but I don't know, red seat belts or something. Having said that, the cabin is still a lesson in small car ergonomics and functional brilliance. So now's where we go into the grey area of this car, because if you forget about out all the GTI-based baggage of expectation, it's actually just a brilliant little thing to drive on its own merits. Good little 6-speed gearbox. Well, very quickly on that, the gear ratios are really short, especially between 5th and 6th, where there's about a 300 RPM difference, and that makes this quite whiny on the motorway. Pretty quick to change direction, and it does all that while making this incongruously loud, growly sound. So when you accelerate like this, sounds mint. Thing is though, you can't take it on its own merit because it's got a GTI badge on it and it costs 14 grand. The problem there is that as well as cars getting fatter and safer generally, they're also getting quicker. And for a GTI, this thing just doesn't feel quick enough. At the traffic lights, you would lose a race against some diesel vans. This almost feels like it's just been engineered by numbers. Like, we'll stick this mid-level Polo engine in it, we'll give it some bigger wheels and we'll give it tartan cloth. Job done. For me, the result is more like what a Seat Mii FR should feel like, you know, like a warmed up version of this car rather than a proper driver's one. The other problem is a basic up costs 5 grand less than this, and if you get a City Go, a little bit less still. And I honestly think that those basic versions give you 8 or 9/10 of the driving fun of this, and obviously all the same practicality and other benefits. What's really confusing for me is that this car here, the Up GTI, is the best city car that you can buy. Best looking, most fun to drive, coolest, most usable, blah, blah, blah. But because of the price and because it doesn't quite match the promise of the badge, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. And that's weird, like, best city car in the world, but don't buy it. Oh well, what are you gonna do? Thanks for watching, appreciate your time. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, that really helps us out. More detailed review of this over at HonestJohn.co.uk, and we'll see you next week. Bye.